Hello, and welcome to the Slumbering Sloth Book Nook, a podcast about all things books, publishing, and much more. My name is Emma, and today my guest is Mark Stay. Mark has worked in publishing for over 25 years, and now he's the author of the successful Robot Overlords and also co-hosts the Bestseller Experiment Podcast. Now let's get on with the show. Welcome, Mark. Hello.
Hello, Emma. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm tickety-boo. As I said before we started recording, I've been fixing our lavatory, so this is a very, very pleasant digression from the travails of plumbing, which I'm not very good at, so as I'm discovering.
Oh, lovely. It's just a lovely Sunday doing some plumbing. Sounds great. Lovely.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so thank you very much for coming on. I know that we discussed slightly before, the start of the whole podcast thing, how it is to get started doing podcasting is always quite a fun thing.
Yeah.
Because you do podcasting yourself, so it's always quite quite hard sometimes to get started. So thank you very much for your support with that. So just first thing, so you worked in publishing for about 25 years, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I wanted to act. My wife and I both got places in drama school. But she got the grant. That's how old I am. And I was working at Waterstones at the time. I only meant to stay for Christmas, but I really enjoyed it. And I worked at Waterstones for 5 years, and then I became a sales rep for Headline Publishing, and then I moved over to the Orion Publishing Group. I spent 15 years there and had a really good time and learned an awful lot. And one of my big accounts there, I was looking after the Amazon account, but I got to know editors and publicists and marketers and everyone in the industry, and it's and of course all this time I was writing as well with a view to getting published and learning the nitty gritty and the ins and outs and the ups and downs of the publishing industry. So yeah, I've been around the block a few times.
Yeah, it sounds quite a few different career sort of paths going on at once. So what kind of main things did you do in publishing? Did you sort of specialise in certain areas when you first went in?
Well, I was known as the science fiction guy because that's what I loved and read, and fantasy, science fiction and fantasy. So when it came to acquisitions and stuff, I was in the sales department, but I always got to read, the science fiction fantasy manuscripts as they came in. I was one of the first people to read Joe Abercrombie and Scott Lynch and authors like that, which was really exciting. And but in the main, I was selling books. I was going out to shops and places like Ottakar's. You remember them? Loved Ottakar's and wholesalers, and then eventually I got the behemoth. I got Amazon, who became a full-time job. Amazon eventually became pretty much my only account, and I've learned a lot about the way they operate as well.
Yeah, because Amazon's huge now and it's pretty much taken over everything traditional booksellers used to take part, because everything you can do now, you can just one click away from buying a brand new bestseller, and it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Amazon, they get people tend to say, oh, the evil Amazon, the tax dodging Amazon, they've closed down the high street and yada yada yada, but they've done a lot of good. I mean, for a start, they revolutionized the industry. Yes, there were e-readers before the Kindle. I remember the Sony, which was a really clunky piece of gear. You had to sort of plug it into your laptop, download a bit of software, synchronize it like old school iTunes, then buy your book, then synchronize it, and then and then Kindle came along. Boom! Oh, I've bought a book.
Yeah, straight there,
that
right
changed
there,
everything.
accessible for you. Yeah,
absolutely. And the self-publishing revolution that came along with it gave a voice to millions of authors, many of whom don't have a connection with publishing, maybe because of they didn't give people voices who never had a voice before. And I'm all for Amazon bashing, don't get me wrong, but they've also done an awful lot of good as well. And they're an incredible account. And I've always found the key to understanding Amazon, whether you're a customer, whether you're a publisher, whether you're an author, is they do everything for their customers. If you ever go to Amazon head office, if you ever get onto their sales floors, there are signs everywhere, and the word is customer-centric. Everything is focused on delivering to the customer. A bad customer experience is a bad day for a vendor manager at Amazon, and they do everything they possibly can to deliver the best service possible.
Yeah,
And that's why, for example, if your book goes out of stock on Amazon and you get that out of stock message that says available in 1 to 3 weeks, which is so frustrating because I know we've got stock in the warehouse and it'll be with them in tomorrow, if not 2 days. Or, okay, if it's Friday, it might be with them Monday, Tuesday at the latest kind of thing. But they put that 1 to 3 week thing there because they work on the Captain Scott principle. So, you know, on Star Trek and the Enterprise, he says, I can't get full power, you know, for 3 hours, but he manages to do it in half an hour, and everyone calls him the miracle worker. Same thing happens with Amazon. They under-promise and over-deliver. So when that book does come in 2 days, people go, oh, Amazon, they're really good, aren't they? Whereas, you know, it was people at the publishers and at the warehouse and the delivery drivers, you know, working every hour God sends to get that book to you. But that's how Amazon works. They do not want to disappoint a customer, which is why you've seen things with reviews disappearing because they don't want to feel that the reviews are being gamed, you know, book reviews, customer reviews. So the latest, you know, hoo-ha is reviews are being removed because if I ask my aunt to write a review for me, they will figure out there's a connection between us.
That's quite insane,
you know,
isn't it?
Through their...
To think that can happen.
They know, but that's what Amazon is all about. They're all about the data. I mean, they don't share that data, but they collect an awful lot of it.
Yeah,
so
of course.
There was a joke. There was a joke in The Onion a few years ago about a woman who got a Valentine's present from an Amazon algorithm that was better than the one she got from her boyfriend. So you know, that's where we're at with Amazon.
Yeah, it's incredible because it's got such a market reach, and you realise, I guess, how important customer service is. I mean, I work in retail at the moment, and I realise how important customer service is. Even I want to work in publishing eventually, that how important those skills are, and especially when it comes to publishing, how much interaction there is between person to person, and it's so important, that relationship between customer and publisher is so important because that's going to be the person that's going to be buying your book at the end of the day. So you need that good rapport with the customer. So, yeah.
And that's something that a good independent bookshop has been doing since day one. It's something that Waterstones would struggle with because, I mean, I worked at Waterstones and we had our regular customers, but we always had hundreds of people coming in on an irregular basis who we didn't know. We knew nothing about them. We never collected their data. We never got a pattern of what they enjoyed. But you know, our regulars we did, and independents will have that cluster of core customers that they know really well. But Waterstones, because we were that much bigger, we knew very little about our customers. And in a way, at the time, we didn't really care. But if they came up to us and said, I'm looking for this kind of book, you would get a personal recommendation based on what we'd read or what one of my colleagues had read, which was invaluable, absolutely invaluable. But again, without knowing as much as possible, you can ask them in the moment, what sort of things do you like? But without knowing that, you can get a bit lost. And that's where Amazon is one step ahead of everyone else, but it's also where I think the indie bookshops have excelled because the ones that are still with us are really, really good at that. Not just because they're selling books, but because they are part of a community. I live in Herne Bay and my nearest bookshop is in Whitstable, the Harbour Bookshop in Whitstable. And they're fantastic. They do lots of local events. They go to schools. They do lots of book launches and book talks and they run book groups. So they've become a hub of the community in a way that maybe a Waterstones wouldn't, and certainly Amazon isn't. And never could be. So I think the two of those things kind of complement each other quite well, even though they're sort of doing the same thing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I live in the southwest, but we don't really have sort of local bookshops. But an experience I had was when I went up to London. I went to Persephone, who are very independent owned, and it was brilliant. Yeah. The way that I got talking to the people who worked in the bookshop and how personal it was, and I got recommended something. It was. Even though people were coming in and out of there, it was fantastic how the company is everyone knows it. Quite a lot of people know it's independent. So that's why I felt quite homely in there. It was quite a homely feel. So that's why I think indie bookshops are fantastic. That's where they've got the niche on, especially in London, have got that sort of very niche, sort of very personal connection with people. Even if you go in there once or twice, I felt quite comfortable. As compared to a big chain or something like that. Not saying that it does, it's just very personalised and I like that. I just love indie bookshops, I love a good indie bookshop. So, it's very, very good.
And that's where that's where word of mouth generally starts as well, and that's the magic elixir that publishers are always looking for. They will spend money on advertising campaigns and shipping the author around the country to go to bookshops and do radio shows and what have you. But the thing that money can't buy is when people start saying to each other, "Have you read X? Oh my gosh, the end of that book was you have to read it. I'll buy you a copy."
Yeah.
You know, that's the kind of thing that bookshops like that get the ball rolling. And then, of course, what happens when it becomes really popular? Amazon swoops in and sells it for £2.98 or whatever, and then it goes mega. But it's just the way things are.
I think that's where sort of the bookshop that I talked about was quite in its own way. It's very sort of keeps itself to itself, and it only does certain books to certain chains, and that's where it's been very clever. And they have their own subscription service, which is very good. So that's how they've kept it quite sort of low key. So just moving slightly, so now you've obviously worked in publishing and you've been experienced. Were you a writer before you started working in publishing, or were you a writer like when you started publishing? How has that helped your experience since you worked in publishing with writing? Has it clashed like between the two?
I've been writing ever since I could hold a pen, basically. But I wanted to act. I'm a big show-off, so I enjoyed acting and getting on stage, and I thought I would combine the two. I mean, I used to write sketches with friends after school. We thought we were going to be the next Monty Python. We clearly weren't. And then I started writing scripts and short stories and books, none of which were any good, but that's the phase you have to go through. Then I started taking acting a lot more seriously, and like I said, I got into drama school. And when my wife came out of drama school, we formed our own little theatre company, and we started doing other people's plays. And I wanted to do a particular play, and then I couldn't get the rights, but I'd already booked the venue. So I had a venue, but no play. And I had to very hurriedly write a play about all the terrible camping holidays my parents had taken me on as a child. And we put it on, and it was really well received. People really enjoyed it. And I come up from this kind of working class background, never known anyone in TV or film or publishing or anything like that. But a friend of mine who at the time was a cable basher. He worked on TFI Friday, used to follow the cameraman around with his cables, He's now a documentary maker. But he said to me, he was like the only person I really knew in the industry. And he said to me, look, there's too many actors, but not enough writers, and you can write, keep writing. And I think that's certainly from the podcast that I do, the Bestseller Experiment, that's what we hear so much is an author just needs some kind of external validation, someone saying to them, you can do this, keep going. That was about 20 years ago. So I started doing a play a year for a few years. We would put the plays on. Then my wife and I started a family, which makes running a theatre company very difficult. And I needed money. So I sold myself for a company car, started working for a publisher and just writing in between things. So I lunch breaks on my commute. And I took one of my plays, turned it into a screenplay. It got optioned by a producer. That introduced me to a director called John Wright, who hadn't made any films at that point. But eventually he and I would go on to write a feature film called Robot Overlords, which is a kids' adventure science fiction film which premiered at the London Film Festival a few years ago. Stars Ben Kingsley and Gillian Anderson. There's lots of fun. And by that time I was at Orion. And I'd written books, and my agent had sent them out, and we'd had the usual rejections, and I was still looking for my identity as a writer. I think half the battle with writing is finding out what kind of writer you are. And while we were in post-production on Robots, the producers were saying, we can have games, we can have t-shirts, we could have a book. And I immediately put my hand up, said, I'll do the book, and I know who can publish it. As if it was that easy. Of course, Gallants weren't interested at first. They said, no, we don't publish employees, we don't publish mates, So I really had to convince them. So, I put together this big PowerPoint with visual effects from the film. I wrote 3 chapters of the book saying, look, it's going to be very different to the screenplay. I'm adding all this extra material. And eventually they were convinced. And that's how my first book was published, Robot Overlords. And coming out of that, when you have a film come out and a book, all sorts of old friends come out the woodwork. And one of them was this guy, Mark DeVoe, who we'd known each other as teenagers but hadn't really been in touch since. But he said, this is amazing, you're living the dream. I've always wanted to write a book, but I've never got beyond 20,000 words. Yeah. And we both love podcasts, and he's a doer. He's someone who gets things done. He's been a project manager. He's started up various companies. He's played at Glastonbury as a DJ. You know, he's done all these incredible things. And I figured actually he might actually be able to do this. So we started the podcast, the Bestseller Experiment, where we challenged ourselves to co-write a novel and get it published and edited and published and up the Kindle charts, self-published, within 12 months, with the idea of getting one of those little bestseller orange flags. And so we co-wrote the book together, and each week we get authors on and editors and people in the industry telling us, you know, about the craft of writing, about the realities of publishing, and we challenged our listeners to beat us to it as well, and a lot of them have. But exactly 1 year on, we published our book, Back to Reality, which is a sort of Freaky Friday, Back to the Future mashup, lots and lots of fun. And we got to number 1 in 10 categories, which was
That is
great.
fantastic.
Really, really good.
That you got that quick.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But the most amazing thing is so many of our listeners who came on this journey with us, they've been signed by HQ, they've been signed by Hera, they've been signed by Gollancz. There's one guy, Mike Shackle, who was about to give up on his writing, and he heard our interview of Joe Abercrombie, and he started writing, and he published a bunch of books under a pseudonym, self-published. And then when he felt he was good enough, he wrote another book, sent it out, and he's now got a 3-book deal with Gollancz.
That's a fantastic.
So I know we've kept the podcast going, and the reason we've kept it going is because we keep hearing these stories. We love speaking to authors. We love hearing their stories. Everyone has a completely different route to publication. There are no absolutes. There's no one way of doing it. As many authors are out there, there are as many stories of how they got published, and that's what we now do. We set out to inspire writers and get you to finish that book and get you to get it out there. And you know, barely a day goes by where we don't get some sort of feedback from someone saying, I heard someone on your podcast, it helped me finish my book, which is great. It's just
I listened to a recent episode at LBF, and like it was quite interesting listening to people talk about their experiences at London Book Fair, because I was there and I was working with the bookseller, doing early mornings, doing the dailies. And when you come out and obviously you look around, you're like, this is something else. When you first go there and experience it, I'd never experienced anything so. I don't know how to describe it.
It's overwhelming. It's completely overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
You walk in there and you, and you don't know where to start.
No.
And I think this is, at the end of that podcast, I said, look, if you're going to go there with purpose. Yeah. And it's only recently they've allowed authors in. So I've said there's an author HQ now.
Yeah, I did go there.
Somewhere where authors can gather and and you can get advice and help, and people are there to help you out. So, it's a bit full on. I mean, it was always industry facing, but now it's spreading out a bit and it's welcoming authors in, and it's incredible. It is incredible. Yeah. And then you got Frankfurt after that. We just had Bologna as well for the children's.
I wish I could have gone to Bologna. I wish I could have gone.
Yeah, no, sounds amazing.
That is my dream, to sort of maybe go to do Frankfurt, Bologna, and maybe one day go to Hong Kong and do over there in Book Expo. That was one of my things I'd love to do. But I think LBF was great to see how things are working, how things are run. I mean, we got to go on the rights floor anyway because we were working up that way, and it was like speed dating, book for book, right? So it was quite something. But I definitely think that writers being allowed into the book fair now is quite good. Because I went to a couple of panels and I saw a lot of budding writers who obviously were going to these workshops and speaking to editors and speaking to people in the industry. And I felt that was a really good opening door for people that want to just get in. I mean, I've only just started writing this year for my uni degree, and I was doing screenwriting. And I've always wanted to try it, and I found a knack for it, and I'm now doing my dissertation as a screenplay, which is something I never in a million years thought I would do. But I mean, going back to writing, how would you say your writing process begins? Like, is there an idea you normally have, or do you just start writing and just let your ideas flow onto a page?
I've never done it the same way twice. I mean, just to give you an idea, I got 3 projects on the boil at the moment. One, I'm currently wrapping up the first draft. It's taken me 10 years to find the shape of this thing. It started with an opening scene and some ideas, which I started putting together, and I attacked it from every angle. Wasn't right. And a conversation with my agent about 6 months ago, and he said something where we go, "Oh, that's what it is." So
Finding your niche.
I've just, and I've just attacked it from that angle, and it's made complete sense, and it's been fantastic. Second project I've got on the go has come out of a conversation I've had with John Wright, who I did Robot Overlords with. We had a brainstorming day. He and I said, well, look, let's bring 5 paragraphs each, 5 ideas, and we'll go through them and see what's. So I had my ideas in my notebook. We go through them, and we'd say, yeah, that's good. This one. And there was an idea that I'd had that we both really clicked with. So basically we've worked on the story outline together, and I will write the screenplay. And that's one of the lovely things about screenwriting. It's very, very collaborative. And I'm working with a director who wants to get the film made, which is great. But he's leaving me alone to write the story. We've agreed on the story outline, and I'm going to write the screenplay, and and then we'll build from there. And then just the other day, I had an idea which I just started typing straight away, and it kind of got stuck after a while. But now I'm going to file that away, let that simmer, and then I'll come back to it at some point. So I don't, like I say, there's no absolutes. There's no one way of doing things, and I try to evolve and change as much as I can. Doing the podcast has changed how I write completely. I was very much stuck in that kind of Joseph Campbell hero's journey rut, where I'd use that essentially as like an outline. But what you soon discover is you have characters that have no agency. They're being dragged along by the story. And what's becoming a lot more important to me is character. And maybe that's what's coming first a lot more often, the idea of a character, where they end up and how they get there. Whereas rather than before, it tended to be a situation, and let's throw this character into a situation. But for me, the character is becoming more and more important. It's taken me a long time to learn that.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I've been doing this module for my second year, and I chose it. But we've learnt sort of about how each week to sort of write characters, and it's been really clever, like how we sort of do workshopping every week. And the first image I had when I started writing my final piece was for this module is this person is sat in a situation, they're dealing with the situation. That was the first image I had in my mind. And I feel sometimes you can write from that situation, or you can write a character from, or that character comes first. And I feel like you can develop a situation around a character. I don't know if you've ever had that before, where you've like, right, I've got this character, but something needs to happen, and I've got this idea, and it just happens as you write it.
Yeah, that's that third project I was talking about, where I had the character, and I wanted to put them in a particular place and a situation, and it's slowly evolving. I'm just seeing how that's developing. So I'm allowing that one to sort of build very, very slowly. But sometimes they all kind of tumble together, and it clicks into place. But like I say, there's no, have a notebook, have somewhere where you can collect these things and you can come back to them, or Evernote, or whatever, piece of software where you can just have it at hand on your phone or whatever. I'm constantly sending myself emails or little voice memos with ideas that I've had. I keep little sticky notes by the bed where I can scribble stuff down in the middle of the night. So it's you never know where inspiration is going to strike, and it's I think you just have to. We had Sarah Pimber on the podcast, and up to the point that she come on, so many authors have said, write every day, really important, write every day, write every day, write every day. And she disagreed very strongly, and she said, no, I don't write every day, but I think every day. I'm constantly thinking about the story. And I think you do have to inhabit that world. And it's difficult because, people have jobs, they have families, they have, responsibilities. And being able to keep that in a corner of your mind is actually quite difficult. Yeah. But it's something that it's like exercise. It's like if you turn up at the gym every day, you will get fitter. If you're at least writing or thinking every day, you will become a better writer.
Yeah, of course. That's quite a bit of wisdom for that one. So that's very awesome.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit of wisdom. I mean, you need that on a Sunday evening. I think it's always quite nice.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So what would you? I know your podcast talks a lot to writers. But what would you say from a personal experience, is like some really good tips for first-time writers, for people that want to get there and they're like, I'm not quite sure if I want to write, I'm not quite sure if this is fit for me. What would your advice be?
I think the write everything. If you are starting out and you've never finished anything, I think the write everything day is important. I mean, Sarah's obviously coming from a position where by that point she'd written about 15 novels and really knows her stuff, you know. But I think if you are just starting out, you've got to make it a habit. You've got to find, and if it's 20 minutes a day, if it's just 20 minutes a day, if it's just 200 words a day, if you do 200 words a day, by the end of the year, you'll have a novel. And so you have to show up and you have to do it. You can't just talk about it. You have to knuckle down and get on with it. One thing we found on the podcast is making a declaration is really important. Making a public declaration. So we say this to authors all the time, you know. So, and this is why NaNoWriMo works. It's that combination of two things, which is you write every day, you set yourself a target every day, and you make that declaration that you're going to write 50,000 words in the month of November. And of course we're in April at the moment, so there's Camp NaNoWriMo going on too. And that really works because finishing something is so important. So few writers actually finish anything. They will talk and they'll rewrite and they'll get, you know, we've come up with all sorts of catchphrases on, you know, the podcast, the muddy middle and the suckage point. That's usually about 30,000 words in the suckage point, where you are exhausted, you're about 30,000 words, you're about a third of the way through the story and you think, this isn't making any sense, it's rubbish, it's no good, I'm just going to stop, I've had another idea, I'm going to start on that other idea. That's where people fail, because they give up. They don't finish something. It's only when you get to the end and you finish it and you go and put it away for 6 weeks, don't look at it for 6 weeks, work on something else, you'll come back to it and you will be astonished at how good it is. You'll notice all the terrible stuff, but at least you'll have some separation from it. You'll be able to look at it and go, oh, you know what, that character doesn't really work, that section doesn't work, that chapter's completely unnecessary. But you've got something you can work with then, something that has a beginning, a middle and an end, and it's finished, and you can shape it, fashion it into shape. And the declaration thing we find is very important. Maybe not for beginners, maybe not if you're just starting out, but if you've, you know, maybe written a couple of books and you're now going to move on to the book, you know, the one that's going to make your name, the one you're going to send out to agents, then, you know, make a declaration, as we did. You know, 12 months we're going to write a book and we're going to get it published, which was a crazy thing to say, because more books fail than succeed. But I tell you what, it put a fire up our backsides, because there's nothing like a public humiliation, and it did make us work, and it did make us get on with it, and it resulted in a book that I'm very proud of. So yeah, it's I'm not pretending any of this is easy. These aren't secret formulas. This isn't a secret sauce. This isn't going to. Most of the time, it is writing, doubting yourself, thinking I'm a complete hack, I shouldn't be doing this is terrible, whatever made me think I could put pen to paper. That's all normal. We all get that. We've spoken to authors, you know, best-selling authors who've told us exactly the same. They still get that. It's hard. It's really hard, because you are pouring out your heart and soul onto paper, and eventually, this is the crazy thing, you're going to put it out there in the public for people to give you 1-star reviews on Amazon. So that's why we do it. So it is hard. It's a tough old journey, but it's very revealing. But the only ones who fail are the ones who give up.
Yeah, of course. I think that's very good advice, especially for people who are just starting out. Especially like you want to get a novel done, and you've got no motivation, and you're like, right, I'm going to put it away. Because they're kind of taught us the same thing with essays. If you're not sure about it, put it away for a couple of days, come back to it. And I always feel like I've got a fresh pair of eyes when you look at something, regardless if that's essays.
Absolutely, yeah.
Narrative fiction, non-fiction, it's all the same. It's all words. You can just come back and just look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. And I think that's always really healthy to have.
For a novel, if you're starting out, if it's the first novel you've written, we always say 6 weeks, which people go, 6 really? But you've lived with this thing. You might have lived with this thing for years, day in, day out, writing it, rewriting it, getting it wrong, getting it slightly less wrong, and then eventually finishing it and thinking, this is brilliant, this is perfect, I'm going to send it out right now. That's a big mistake. Give yourself 6 weeks, maybe work on something else, or just give yourself a holiday, and then come back to it. And that distance, that remove, gives you enough space to be critical about it and to spot the good stuff and the bad stuff.
Especially when you're editing your own work, which I know from experience is not... Yeah, we all think we're great writers and you're like, I don't want to look at that. Anyway, so just lastly, as we come to the end, is there any books you've read recently that you would recommend to people to go out and read? Or anything you've loved recently, you're like, oh, I really need to talk about this book.
Well, I read Rosewater by Tade Thompson, who is a fantastic author. He writes the most amazing science fiction. If you're into hard sci-fi, it's really good. It's really, really good. And he's of Nigerian heritage, and he sets the book in Nigeria and in a future Nigeria. And it's funny, I was talking to someone who knows him today in the industry, and they were saying they read one of his first books, and they were talking about how it needed work, but they could see promise. But now 15 years on, I mean, Tade has been talking, he's been nominated for awards. I think he's nominated for the Hugos this year. His time has come, but we'll all see him as an overnight success, but I can tell you he has been working away for at least 15 years to get where he is today, and he's an exceptional writer. It's fantastic science fiction. The other thing I'm reading as a sort of palate cleanser between books are the Jeeves and Wooster short stories by P.G. Wodehouse, which are just comic genius. Everything you need to know about comedy is in their character, funny lines, timing, pace, storytelling. It's got absolutely everything, and it's just amazing. And like I said, I'm trying to read one or two between novels, but you end up getting sucked into them because they're so readable, they're so funny, and just works of pure genius.
That's great. That's really nice to have a classic in there as well, which is always nice. Well,
yeah,
exactly. Thank you so much for coming on today to discuss everything and about your career and your writing. I really appreciate it. So people can follow you on Twitter, and what's your Twitter handle?
I'm at Mark Stay, and if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Bestseller XP. We're on Facebook as well and Instagram. I'm at markstaywrites.com online as well. So I offer writer services, and I have a free 10-minute Skype consultation. So if you've got any doubts about your writing, drop me a line. Come and find me at markstaywrites.com, and you'll see the tab Writer Services, and you can chat to me over Skype, and hopefully we can sort things out for you.
That's great. Thank you very much for coming on today, Mark. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for Mark coming on the podcast today. You can follow Mark at markstay on Twitter. If you'd like to get involved with the podcast, you can get involved via Twitter at novelm16 and use the hashtag slothcast, or alternatively you can email at theslumberingSlothBookNook@gmail.com. You can also access the podcast via YouTube and download on Podbean for the on-the-go experience. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to next week. Bye-bye.